We all know credit scores matter. The higher the credit score, the better. What you may not know is what goes into the credit score. This is a pie chart accounting for 100% of people's credit. For time purposes, I'm going to identify the two biggest pieces of the pie, which account for about 2/3 of the overall score. So the first one, the biggest piece of the pie, is payment history. It accounts for 35% of your score. So quite simply, pay all your debts on time, you get an A+ on your report card for 35% of your grade. But what if you're late? There are 3 different ways, the computer algorithm that does credit scoring, 3 different ways that it analyzes a late payment. We have recency, frequency, and severity. I'm going to define what these are, and I'm going to ask each of you to raise your hand and vote for the one that you think has the biggest impact on score. Recency, how long ago were you late? Frequency, how often were you late? Severity, how late were you? So show of hands, how many of you think recency has the biggest impact on scoring? 1 person, 2 people. How many of you think frequency? Okay, much more. How many of you think severity? Okay, so in your poll, frequency won. Not to bum you out, but it's not the right answer. But you can make a case for any one of these, but the right answer is, drum roll please, recency. Because of one word. It's kind of a funny word. It begins and ends with the letter M and has an M in between. What's that word? Momentum, or lack thereof. So there's 2 different ways we can look at that. Kind of the positive, glass half full way, which is, hey, time heals all wounds. That late payment I had back in college, it's not going to affect us anymore unless you just got out of college, right? The glass half empty. The negative way is, you can have years, even decades of perfect credit, at least temporarily ruined by late payments. So let's now bring in divorce. A lot of these couples have joint debts. Sometimes people don't pay their debts on time, accidentally, because they're not communicating at a high level, and sometimes they don't pay debts to be spiteful. I had a situation where I had a client who said she had a credit score in the mid-700s. I pulled it, wasn't mid-700s. She had perfect credit history for the whole 7 years up until the last 2 months. All 5 of her trade lines were now 60 days late. I asked her what was going on. She says, my attorney said not to pay my debts until my ex plays ball. Far be it from me to get in the way of communications and strategies with your attorney, but you no longer have an option to borrow money anytime soon. So this is an example of where divorce can sometimes intersect with our guidelines. Now, the second biggest piece of the pie is credit utilization. Think of credit cards. We all know how credit cards work. You have a credit limit. You charge up your money, pay it down. That's your balance. Every single time your balance is charged up or paid down, that affects your balance. Once a month, your creditor reports your balances to you in your monthly statement and sends those same numbers to the credit bureaus. Then someone like me pulls credit and I see what the most recently reported balances are. The more you tap into your credit card, the higher your ratio of utilization, the more it hurts your score, the lower the better. Let's bring in divorce again. Let's say I have a divorcing party meets with me in January. Just getting started with the whole idea of getting divorced, wants to get an idea if they have a chance of keeping the marital home. We weigh in January based on what we see. Say they have 1 credit card, Capital One, $20,000 limit, balance is $2,000. They're using 10%. That's a lot of restraint in this example here. They're going to score high on this 30% of their score. Let's say I weigh in on whether they can be approved, and they say, okay, great, I'll get back to you when my divorce gets closer to being done. We don't speak until September. We need to update the exhibits in the file. I need to re-pull credit. What if I see that Capital One now has a balance of $19,500 on it? It's going to weigh down the 30%. So here's where divorce becomes just another factor here. Oftentimes, one party moves out of the marital home. Regardless of which person is our borrower, they may have some shopping to do to backfill needed furniture, appliances, audio-visual equipment. And a lot of them also put their attorney fees on their credit card. I'm not suggesting we don't pay the attorneys, But if we start tapping into higher ratios of utilization, we start tanking that 30% of the score. I have a lot of folks that have perfect payment history in that first slide, but bring down their entire 30%, and they're sitting at scores in the mid 600s right now, and they can't figure out why their score is so low. That's almost a third of your credit score, those balances.